Okay, you guys, welcome to science today. Today, you guys, we're going to work on, it's a life science lesson on it's reproduction and meiosis. And in Google Classroom, there's a video that I posted. I think it's about 3 minutes. So you can watch that video, and these are the questions that go along with that. So I think there's 8 of them. And then afterwards, the answers are all right here. So that's a lesson if you want to go back and watch that video. That'd be great. And then you can go ahead and try to answer the questions. So I'm going to start right here. And this is just some vocabulary we're going to be, that'll be important. So we're going to look at asexual reproduction, and that's production of an offspring requiring just one parent. Base pairs, those are two chemical bases that join together to form the gene and the DNA. Budding, that's a type of asexual reproduction in which a parent sprouts a smaller version of itself. Double helix, the shape of a DNA molecule shaped like a twisted ladder. Egg cells are the female sex cells. Fertilization, when egg and sperm cell join together. Fission, it's a type of sexual reproduction when an organism splits into two identical organisms. Fragmentation, that's a type of sexual reproduction in which an offspring grows from a piece of the parent. We have gene, that's a chemical base in DNA that determines traits. Meiosis is the division of sex cells. Mitosis is a process in which base pairs in the DNA molecule come apart and then form copies of DNA strands with other disconnected bases. Sexual reproduction, that's reproduction of an offspring requiring two parents. Sperm cells are the male sex cells. Spore formation, it's a type of sexual reproduction in which tiny cells break open and release spores in the atmosphere. And zygote is the first cell that's produced from fertilization. Okay, so those are some of the terms are going to come up in this unit. And this is something you guys can just refer to if you get confused. You can go back and look at kind of the vocabulary. So first thing we're going to look at is asexual reproduction. And it says focus. During asexual reproduction, only one parent is required. So it says all living things come from other living things. You came from your parents, and someday you may have children of your own. And there are two different ways in which living things reproduce themselves. One way is called asexual reproduction. And asexual reproduction means the offspring of a living organisms come from a single parent and has the exact DNA as the parent. Okay, and there are different types of asexual reproduction. It says in this unit we will discuss fission, budding, spore formation, and fragmentation. So fission, that's when like microorganisms such as bacteria are reproduced by this process of fission. During fission, an organism splits into two identical organisms. Each new organism has the ability to grow the same size as the original parent. This fission process can reproduce organisms very quickly. You kind of see a diagram of it over to the right here. Now this is the example. Remember, this is asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, only one parent. And this is an example of fission right here. Okay. Second one is budding. And budding says there are many smaller organisms that use the process of budding to reproduce themselves. During budding, a single parent forms a smaller version of itself that sprouts from its own body. The bud has the exact same DNA as the parent. Once the bud is large enough, it breaks off from the parent. And you can see that in this diagram here. Kind of like the little branch is an example of budding. And you can see when it gets big enough, it breaks off from the single parent. Okay, and that's really what this branch is to the right. Smaller, it gets bigger, bigger, and eventually it falls off. And that's what budding is. Okay. And remember, these are all asexual. So this is all from one parent. And the third type is spore formation. And there are some types of plants algae, and fungi that reproduce themselves by using a process called spore formation. During spore formation, a tiny cell with a kind of protective coating is produced on the plant, algae, or fungus. When the weather is just right, the spore breaks open and the tiny spores release. These tiny spores have the same DNA as the parent spore. They form a new organism that's identical to the single parent. And that's kind of over here. You can see the spores on the leaves, and it says when the weather's right, they can break off. Maybe when it's warm enough or windy enough, the spores break off and they form a new organism similar, or excuse me, identical to the parent. Okay, and then we're going to look at fragmentation here. And it says fragmentation is another type of asexual reproduction. During fragmentation, a new organism is grown from a part of the parent. For example, in a sea star, certain kinds of worms or other types of plants and fungus are cut apart and new identical organisms can grow from the pieces. And you can kind of see that down here. So something could break off from this sea star, and then it forms the exact same thing as the parent. And this is just an example of a sea star doing it. And those are all asexual. That only needs one parent. Okay, so sexual reproduction, two parents. So if you can remember, asexual is one, sexual is two. Okay, so sexual reproduction is a process that requires two parents. During sexual reproduction, the offspring or the new organism gets half the DNA from one male parent and half from one female parent. So the new organism is a combination of DNA. So it's not an exact copy of either one of its parents. As you guys know, we have traits from both our mom and dad. Okay. So meiosis. It says organisms that reproduce sexually have a special cell called sex cells. The sex cells of the females are called eggs, and the sex cells of the male are called sperm. It says all the cells in an organism have a certain number of chromosomes. For example, every cell in the body of a chicken has 78 chromosomes, and every cell in a pineapple has 50 chromosomes. But sex cells are different from other kinds of cells in organisms. Sex cells only have half the number of chromosomes that are in the other cell. That means there are 39 chromosomes in the sex cell of a chicken and 25, so they have half. So the chicken has 78, and so 39 would be from the mom and 39 would be from the dad, and the pineapple the same thing. There's 50 total, so there's 25 from each. And this kind of shows a chart so you get a better idea here. So in cabbage, there are 18 total chromosomes, but 9 sex, 9 of the male, 9 of the female. A cat has 38, so you'll see 19 of the male, 19 of the female. A dog is 78, 39 are from the male, 39 are from the female. An elephant is 56, 28 from the male, 28 from the female. Human, 46, so we have 23 from mom, 23 from dad. And yeast, 32, 16 male, 16 female. So it says sex cells are produced by a process called meiosis. During meiosis, a single sex cell divides and produces 4 new cells. Each new cell only has half of the chromosomes of the parent. So in a human egg cell, has 23 chromosomes, a sperm cell has 23 chromosomes. Okay. So, meiosis. So sexual reproduction in an organism is when an egg and sperm cell join together. This process is called fertilization. The first new cell that is produced from fertilization is called a zygote, because the zygote is a combination of 2 different parents. It's half the chromosomes from the egg cell and half the chromosomes from the sperm cell. Now the zygote has a full set of chromosomes, it will divide using the process of mitosis, form a new organism. And I think we covered this last Thursday, I believe. So you can see up here, I'm just going to walk you through this. Number one, before meiosis begins, the parent cell makes copies of its chromosomes. So those are 2 X's. Then the membrane around the nucleus disappears and twin chromosomes become visible. Okay, so it splits into 2. And then the pairs of twin chromosomes line up in the middle of the cell. The pairs then move apart. So you can see it's 1 cell, and they start to go to the side. Then there are 2 cells. Then they break apart. So as a membrane forms around each group of chromosomes, and the cell divides into 2. So this is 1, then it breaks into 2. And they're like the X's. Twin chromosomes line up in the middle of each cell. And you can see these cells are separate now. As they split, the single chromosomes move to the opposite sides of the cell. So you can see they're kind of moving to the opposite sides of the cell. And then a membrane forms around each set of the cells, so they now go into 2 cells. Then the cells divide into 2. So you can see there's 2, they both go into 1, and they start to move to the side. The membrane forms around kind of in the middle, splitting it in 2, and then you have 2 cells. Okay. So the next part is fertilization. So fertilization can happen in different ways of living things that use sexual production as a method of producing new organisms. In a flowering plant, the sperm cells are located in the pollen. Pollen's a powdery substance you can often see blowing off the plants. It's produced in the part of the plant called the stamen. A plant's egg cells are produced by the pistil. When pollen is transferred from the stamen to the pistil, fertilization has occurred. The wind and animals like bees, birds, mammals help to pollinate by carrying pollen from one plant to another. Okay, so that pollen can blow off one plant and go to another. Sometimes bees can carry it, things like that. So you can see here is a diagram of plants. So it says the sperm cells are located in the pollen. Pollen is a powdery substance you can also see blowing off plants. Okay. You can see the egg cells, the stamen, the pistil. Those are just the reproductive organs of a plant. Then it says sexual reproduction in animals can happen inside or outside the animal's body. For example, in most cases, fish lay eggs outside their body. The male fish find the eggs and then fertilize them. This is true for most animals that live in or close to water. The water keeps the eggs moist. But it says most mammals do not live in the water, so the fertilization of eggs cells by the sperm happens on the inside of the female body. In reptiles and birds, eggs are fertilized inside the body. Then the female lays them and carries them until they're ready to hatch, Okay, so, and these are just some questions from that reading. I think there's 8 of them, and then the answers are just right here. Okay, and then here's some more vocabulary. This is just kind of like a cheat sheet right here. It talks about what we covered. So you can just go back, and if you need to, just read through this again. Just remember, 2 biggest things are there's sexual and asexual reproduction. The asexual only has 1 parent. Sexual has 2. Okay. So go ahead and go back and watch the video. And remember, the questions for the video are this first page right here. And then if you've watched the video, answer the questions and you still aren't sure, the answers are right here. And then the questions of the things we just covered are starting right here. Okay, so that's it for today. I'm going to start social studies here in about 15 minutes. Hopefully I'll see some of you there. Have a great day. Bye.